most people in Ireland believed this wasn't a matter for the state. This was a matter for the church. The church should deal with this. It's got nothing to do with the state. It's an outrageous thing to think that Taoiseach might say now, but it was the commonly held view at the time. And it was reflected right across authority in this country, right across power in this country. People believed that the church was above and beyond the state and was not accountable to the state. And that's the situation that we had collectively tolerated, created, and allowed to exist. Now, I don't mean that there are, as I said, different levels of responsibility here. And those in positions of power and influence learn how to use that power and influence. Our failure is if we don't hold them to account if they're abusing that power once we know about it, or if we choose not to inform ourselves when we can see it happening around us. Their failure and their responsibility is the abuse of it. There's no doubt about the fact that that power has been abused. But historically, the notion that the church would be held to account by the state was a no-no. I mean, I had a government minister say to me, again, it would have been in 2003, that up until very recently, it was common practice for all major pieces of legislation to be passed by the church hierarchy before it went through Cabinet to the Dáil. So sign-off had to come from Catholic Church leadership before it went to the democratically elected Parliament of the Republic. That's the level of power that they exerted in our society. And it was an absolute and reprehensible failure of the state to properly hold the church to account. I mean, that's the real failure. And that's where we need to get to. And, you know, if we think this is history, you'll hear an awful lot at the moment about accountability. Suddenly in Ireland we're all very focused on accountability, and that's hugely welcome because we need to be. Accountability isn't about blaming or judging people. It's about making sure that we ask questions and that we have transparency for how decisions are made, decisions that affect all of our lives. It's a basic principle of human rights law, and it's a basic human rights principle that people have an absolute right to influence and be consulted in decisions that affect their lives. It also makes sense, doesn't it? If something's going to affect you, you should have a say in what happens. Well, that's what accountability means. It's not a negative. In my job, accountability helps me to do a good job. I'm accountable to our membership, because we're a membership organisation. I'm accountable to an executive committee elected by our membership who manage me. They're my bosses. My bosses are the membership. I'm accountable to the staff that I work with for the decisions that I make. I'm accountable to our international movement. And by being open to that accountability, I make much, much better decisions. It's not a negative, it's a real positive. So we're talking more about accountability in this country, and maybe we're even getting to the point where we might recognise it as valid. But it's not something that's only for when things go bad or when people make wrong decisions. Accountability is about making sure that we make collective capacity to live full, meaningful, enriched, interconnected lives. So I keep learning stuff. I mean, you know, a year ago when I talked about the things that I've done and what I probably wouldn't have said that bit about I recognise the validity of what I've done, because for a long time I didn't want to see that. I was kind of embarrassed by it. You know? But it's important to recognise the things that you've done and to be real about them, to recognise them realistically and not simply dismiss them. That's to distort it as well. So, I mean, you know, in a year's time, if I stood here talking to you, I'd probably be saying other things that I've discovered about myself that also may change. But awareness is an evolving thing. I'm really aware that we're going to have to stop. But there's one very quick thing that I'd like to do, and I would like to read you just a very small passage from the end of the book, which hopefully is one to just lift things up a little bit. And this is really just a reflection about the significance of facing the past and the possibility that it offers us. The book ends, by the way, with the publication of the Ferns Report, which was back in 2005, because I had to choose a moment where there was a natural ending to the story. Things have moved on significantly since then. The Ferns Report ensured that Irish society faced up to the fact that thousands of children had been raped and abused by some of the most powerful members of our society, and that many of us turned a blind eye or refused to believe it was possible in the first place. We could never again say, I didn't know. The scandal of this clerical abuse has caused enormous hurt to very many people. People like my dad, who features in this book a lot, our relationship is a big part of it, my family and me, and all the other victims and their families. People like Monica and John Fitzpatrick, who lost their son Peter. Peter shot himself in the chest at the age of 23. People like the very many faithful and loyal clergy and lay Roman Catholics who were failed by a church hierarchy that betrayed the teachings of Christ. People like the families of those who perpetrated the abuse, who find themselves shamed by the acts of their loved ones despite their own innocence. Secrets and lies and the fear of the truth have had many victims. So what of the future? Can we move forward with confidence? Has the time come to consign all of this to history? I don't think so. As long as stories such as mine have something to teach us about what it means to be human, we must be open to hearing them again and again. We must learn that the terrible things that happen in the world, the things we humans do to each other, are only possible as long as we choose to tolerate them. We must learn that doing nothing in the face of great wrong is not passive. It is an act of violence, a violent refusal to act when we have the capacity to understand the harm done and the power to prevent it. We have created the world we live in, and we have the power, individually and collectively, to change it when change is needed. It may not always be easy, but it is possible, even inevitable, if enough of us decide to stand up and demand change. Be it ending the cover-up of clerical sexual abuse by the Roman Catholic Church, or closing Guantanamo Bay and ending the use of torture, or outlawing the death penalty, or challenging human rights abuses in China or at home in our own countries. Every one of us can be a powerful force for good, but only if we choose to be. What would it be like for us if we were to change? What would that demand of us, and what would it mean for us? We are so frightened of the darkness in our collective humanity that we fail to embrace the light that exists in at least equal measure there, the profound beauty in our own humanity that can respond with truth and courage to the things we do and see that are simply wrong. We are so frightened of acknowledging the awful things done to others by people close to us, and even by ourselves, that we end up through denial allowing such things to happen. In our silence we collude, in our denial we facilitate, and in our softly spoken words of gossip, we fail to take responsibility for what we know. We can only be enriched if we have the courage and compassion, the humanity and integrity to name injustice wherever we see it, especially when we are party to causing injustice ourselves. Thank you very much.
That was a very good talk, wasn't it? In fact, it was much more than that. It was a searingly important talk. There are very, very complex things said to you today in very simple language. You heard about, at the very start, the value of conversation. And I just list some of the things. The value of conversation, how things change. The role of every single person in that, questioning the cult of leadership and the diminution of personal responsibility that entails, leadership versus the power of the individual, and accountability, the importance of humanity. These themes kept coming back in what Colm said. Accountability and responsibility. Those underlay everything he talked about. The poet W.B. Yeats, whom you may have heard of, said, "In dreams begin responsibilities." You, young people, you are the dreamers. You are the people who can imagine a different church, a different country, a different Ireland, and a different future. So, in education here, you're being given a chance, you're being given a space in which to imagine well, and your lecturers are helping you in doing that. So, and how important a task it is when we have heard the Ireland that Colm has described to us, and we recognise it. It has been a signal honour to have you here, Colm. I'll buy the book and I'll join in Amnesty International anyway, so I hope the rest of you do.
I get one of his work.
So, can I ask you to thank him in the way that you know best?
Get out there and change the world, all right?